Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. 2020 election here. Let's talk about the governor's race. No two better people. Jane Dueker, longtime Democratic consultant, former chief of staff of the governor, former many things, now media personality. Welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here.
And I assume possibly voting for Nicole Calloway?
Yes.
David Barklage, working for a PAC that supports the governor, dean of the Missouri Republican Party. Welcome back, sir.
Thanks, sir.
Let's jump off the top. State of the state was this week. The governor came out and basically said no gun control, right? The gun control thing, I thought, was basically you had an NPR reporter that probably, I'm going to step out on a limb and say this reporter supports gun control.
A bad headline.
Yeah, took and kind of massages, maybe took the situation what they wanted to see. He also said he's against Medicaid expansion, going to work against it. I think that's, if you're doing budgets, I don't know how you can kind of be for Medicaid expansion unless you're willing to cut other places, right?
Well, I think that where the governor's concern is that it's a constitutional amendment, and that dramatically restricts what he and the legislature can do. I think Republicans are having a real problem about what their messaging needs to be on healthcare. Healthcare is a double-digit issue. I mean, it is at the top of all the rankings.
Explain what that means.
Well, it's the top of all the rankings in terms of concern. You've got raising deductibles. You've got all kinds of issues. You got sort of Obamacare there. Costs have been rising. No one seems to have a post-Obamacare answer.
Jane, can you honestly address healthcare at the Missouri State Capitol level?
Well, I mean, it's hard because what you have to explain to people is that the failure to do something about Medicaid and the failure to do something about health care means it's going to be a hidden tax increase to all the insured population. All the my insurance premiums are going to go up because people are going to go to the hospital, they're going to get uncompensated care, and we're going to pay for it. So it depends on whether you want to be open about it and say, look, we're going to help the insured population and we're going to spread this out further with Medicaid expansion, or we're going to keep sticking our head in the sand. I mean, I too.
Are you going to pay more tax? I mean, here's the thing, though. You've said in this room with this state budget out here, and I agree with you. I think that's generally an accepted fact that the more people that go to the ER for no reason or have to have their surgeries written off, that is going to be passed on to taxpayers. But as far as the state budget goes, if you take more and put it into healthcare, you take it from somewhere.
Well, and I understand that, but I think the tax increase would be lower than the insurance premium increase.
David, she said tax increase.
And so, no, look, are the additional taxes, but I mean, I think the problem is, and there's a part of which I agree with him, a constitutional amendment. I mean, I worked on the budget with Governor Holden. I mean, it's, taking away that flexibility in very tough times and declining revenues, which aren't happening right now. But when that does happen, having a constitutional amendment does constrain things because general revenue basically only has three things: Medicaid, education,
and it goes back
prisons.
to trust issue. I think there was greater trust that the group understanding that would have gone for a statutory increase. But there's just not that trust or that dialogue.
Well, it's almost as easy.
Groups.
It's not that much more difficult to go change the Constitution, right?
Because
no, it is hard to change the Constitution.
But it's not that much harder to change it than put it on statutorily.
You need more signatures, but
which is in Missouri, frankly, is just spending more money to collect them.
But to amend or suspend a constitutional creates a much bigger hurdle, and I think that's what the proponents were looking for. They wanted to make sure they protected it.
Let's take a half step back, though, Jane. What do you think of the speech? I mean, Governor Parson, when he stands in that dais with Governor Keogh behind him and Speaker Haar, he gives a speech. He comes off sincere. I thought it was a well-done speech. He recognized his wife, which went over very well. I thought Mike Parson's speech was well received by, I mean, the Democrats have to not find something not like about it, which there was legitimate things they wouldn't like, but I thought it was well done.
No, and I did like the part about infrastructure. I've always agreed with Governor Parson on infrastructure. Our infrastructure is failing. It's falling apart. We have to make a commitment to that if we're going to compete. So I was happy about that part, and I think you probably saw some other Democrats who believe in the infrastructure piece. I think Medicaid, not addressing Medicaid is a problem, and it's going to continue to be a problem, and I agree with you. That's a big issue for the voters. I was very happy to see him talk about crime. We all know that is the #1 issue with voters, which is, we have to keep people safe, and that is a challenge right now, and I appreciate him weighing in on that issue, and I know the police officers I represent also appreciate that. I thought the part about his wife was really nice, and I thought, I mean, it's hard. It's hard not to like her. I mean, if you've ever met her, she's a wonderful woman, and so I thought that was a lovely tribute.
I always jokingly refer to him as sort of the Andy Griffith of the politicians, and that is a positive growing up. Andy Griffith was always the smartest guy.
I said Jim Neighbors, but close.
But Andy Griffith was always the guy that sort of got to the answer and downplayed it and everything else, but he always did the right thing, everything else. And he may not be slick, but I don't think people want slick. I think he's real. I think he reinforced
Very
that. And look, his willingness to say, he came out, he said, if Medicaid expansion passes, I'll implement it. If we need to
he
change,
has no choice.
Right? But
some people would fight.
My point is
right.
that he tries to do the right thing. He looks at these things and tries to do the right thing. On guns, that was not an easy thing to do. On several issues, he has made it harder to avoid a primary because he's taken positions that I think are reflective of the Missouri people. And that's courage. And, you know, as much as on the political side as I am, that I call and go like, what are you doing? You know, please wait until after filing or
Refugees.
something. The point is that he's doing the right thing, and you can't criticize him. I mean, you call the phone and you're like, okay, I want to criticize my guy for being authentic, real, and doing the right thing.
Well, if you're some bot on Twitter, you can. But in reality, I mean, it's hard to criticize someone that's doing what they believe. You can disagree with it, though.
Well, gun control's not getting through the legislature. Why are we even? I mean, look.
I'll tell you why. It's because Mike Parson had mayors of this state who represent a lot of Missourians too in his office, and in front of him, he didn't want to say, "I'm not doing your ideas ever. Get out." So a reporter said, "Of course you're for gun control." Part of this, I think, is going to be the legislative fight. Mike Parson wants to do $100 million in rainy day fund spending or rainy day fund savings, which is they could not raise education much because of that. Now the formula is now where you can kind of hit the education. It's not what when you were there. It's not the same formula. But that may be the part where the Senate and the House, it may be hard to do $100 million in rainy day fund savings, and I didn't really see anybody that impressed with the idea.
Well, and I think that issue is going to get more discussion as time goes on.
In the legislature, for sure.
Exactly.
Politicians don't do anything that's really good for long term. They're more interested in the quick fix. They don't want to address pensions. They want to get pay raises and take the credit for that, but not fix pensions.
Limit. I agree. Yeah.
But on that, we are in a sustained economic growth. Whether who's getting it or not, we can argue from partisan perspective. But this is not going to continue, and we don't need to set back our institutions, especially our children, by having to do deep cuts because we failed to provide adequate revenues when the time was good.
This has happened in our lifetime. When you and I were working together, when I was in the governor's office, it was horrible. And we said we need
$100 million wouldn't have saved you then.
No, but it would have helped. And the idea that we are committed to making sure that we have a backstop. Well, we were looking for more.
What's $100 million worth 20 years ago today? I mean, I don't know that it helps, but let's do something that would help Nicole Galloway. Nicole Galloway has to watch these debates saying, dear God, please nominate Joe Biden, right? You see the socialists are now fighting with each other. Can you imagine anyone, can you imagine Bill McKenna, who knows Jefferson County very well, if Bernie Sanders comes up to town, if he come to Arnold, Bill McKenna would be in Branson, right?
I've been very clear that
I would drive him to the deal just to get the picture. But
I've been very clear that if we nominate Elizabeth Warren,
what's the point?
We're done. So but I also think Nicole has made her own way in Missouri, being a watchdog and being competent and being extremely
and I agree with you. I think Nicole Galloway is impressive, but can she be impressive enough to overcome a fake Indian socialist?
I mean, I think, but I do think that
Who
Biden.
is that?
Yeah, right. Name calling.
I just don't know. I don't know how you could literally, if you actually think Bernie Sanders could compete anywhere in the state.
She's still not a serious candidate. She's 15 points down in the most charitable polls. Here's the problem. At what point she actually becomes serious, then people are going to ask the question, who do you support for president? What about their policies, everything else? And that's a problem because the Democrat Party in Missouri is split more than I've ever seen it. It is progressives in the city and everybody else. And there is no balance.
Have you met the conservative caucus?
Yeah.
I mean, we're having challenges on
but it's
both
almost,
sides.
it's like all the energy is in the progressives in the cities, maybe some in Columbia, and then you got people like yourself and Chris Koster and others who are sitting there going like, boy, I don't know if I feel comfortable in this party. Just like some people have felt the same about Tea Parties, and we're seeing that more and more.
Just like Chris Koster one time felt about the Republican Party.
But Nicole Galloway is making rookie mistakes.
Jane, let me ask you this question though, because you know Nicole Galloway. I know Nicole Galloway. She's a very candid person. Not rude, but she's candid. But on impeachment, which is the biggest issue in any newspaper in this state, she's silent. Now, that is, to me, that is not on brand for her. that gets a little hard to me to actually sustain that she can't say her opinion on that. Now that, I don't know how she reconciles that.
Well, I think it's easy. Why would she answer? It has nothing to do with her job. It has nothing to do
That's
with
the
her
best
job.
you got.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with her job, that's true.
It
That's
really
true.
does. It has nothing to do with wanting to be governor. It has
I
nothing
think
to
she
do with
is
her-
honest as a person, but I think
do
her
too.
campaign.
I think you guys want to drag her into that because you think it's good for
Oh,
you.
now I think
And
that-
it's not
nah,
idea.
Shall we go back a couple of years and talk about some things you wanted to drag, like tie Trump into every Missourian running?
Well, I know. I love it because he just hired
Well, there
Harvey
you go.
Weinstein's lawyer. So I think
But
we
here's the
can
thing.
bring that into the mix.
She
as
may
well.
be honest, but her campaign isn't. They put on this video criticizing the governor, and one of the women looking and saying, "No, we got kicked off Medicaid." Well, the fact is that woman got back on Medicaid. The Parsons administration helped her get back on Medicaid.
You know-
that wasn't part of the narrative.
Guys,
You just got finished saying that healthcare is a double-digit issue. That
It
is going
is.
to
Well,
be
I'll
a
tell you what's a
legitimate
double-digit
issue, and she's
issue.
But
on
at
the
least
better
put
side.
at least put real facts.
Let's talk about
Real
Republicans
people.
that may be divided. There was somebody on the East Coast filed a lawsuit this week. Another East Coast journalist wrote about how Eric Greitens could come back. It was well received by some of his old supporters on the internet.
The 12 of them?
I think there's more than that. And
Nothing has changed. He's still a predator.
But
and we
he-
move on.
Are you going to force me to
how
defend
interesting
Eric
could he?
Greitens?
How interesting could he
How
be if he
can you?
came back, though? I mean, how much more interesting is this election cycle if Eric Greitens is back?
Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe this is more of a Republican problem,
Sure.
so you guys could speak better to it. However, I think Missourians don't want. I mean, he was chaos. It was awful for our state. I mean, if he thinks that that's a positive thing to put Missourians through that again, go for it. Hey, it's good for people like me. 'cause
Now,
We
it's
need a pro
Barklage-
football.
chaos.
If we need a pro football team again, we need to get her because she can lob and deflect better than
If
anybody
there were
else.
two people in this
That's
state that
tennis,
were
by the
never
way.
sold, David, it might have been you and I on the Republican Party, all up front. However, I do think there's a lot of people that were. And now, this is an interesting thing for the Republican Party. If Eric Greitens comes back, I mean, I guess the values folks are gone, right? I mean, you can't walk around and thump Bibles if you're voting for
Look,
this guy.
he has every right, as every politician does, to have their day
Sure.
in court, and that day in court is coming.
Or
One.
to run.
And that day in court will say a lot about, especially in his mind, I think his supporters, of whether or not he was justifiably pushed out of office. There are other issues out there, though, that have to be resolved. You have a massive complaint that was filed to the ethics by Jay Barnes last November that's disappeared. That can't happen by law. It's got to be somewhere. And so I think that has to be resolved before he can step in. So I don't think it's a question of if Eric Greitens tries to get back in politics, as long as this massive complaint is out there and doesn't result in
I think
anything
it's a question
serious.
of when, but
It's a
I
win.
will ask you the question now. I think that Eric Greitens is a very formidable opponent in the
Very.
Republican primary for any office, but I'm not sure that his biggest opponent is not going to be him. I mean, it was
Well, don't
his
you have to
actions.
do the fake redemption tour before you can actually try to run again?
We'll
He
see.
hasn't done the fake redemption
see.
tour yet, so maybe
Will we see
oughta-
that, David?
I'm not getting her line. Yeah, of course you will, because is that he follows the script, he follows the plan, he's very well disciplined, he's got smart advisors. If that's part of it, that's what you're going to see.
Eric Greitens? Are you
Yeah.
saying that about him?
Eric Greitens.
Oh, okay.
All
I
right, well, this was
disagree.
fun. We have to do this again, right?
Absolutely.
Good. We'll be right back on the Opinion Maker panel, but first I want you to go to showmemissouri.com. Had a great part of Real Missouri down in Carter County. Had Dr. Oakley, the man that wrote the book on Carter County, along with the sheriff and our Farm Bureau president. We had a great time discussing the Yellow Sucker Trophy and everything Carter County. Go to showmemissouri.com on the history of Missouri one county at a time. We'll be right back with Representative Phil Christofanelli after this.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads, because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations, and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association.
Your energy needs are changing. That's why at Ameren, Missouri, we're not waiting on the future. We're building it with the Smart Energy Plan, advancing thousands of projects across the state, helping reduce emissions through cleaner energy sources, boost reliability with self-healing equipment, and better withstand storms with new composite poles. Moving Missouri forward and bringing us all a little closer together. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. Opinion Maker panel time. John Bowman, head of the local NAACP. Thank you so much for joining us. First time on the show.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I'm happy to be here.
Jesse Lawder of Planned Parenthood, first time. Welcome back, or welcome to the show, sir.
Great to be here.
Phil Christofanelli, longtime friend of the show. Welcome back.
Glad to be here.
Earl Simms, first time. You're like the veteran now, Phil. I mean, you're too young to be the senior person of anything. But Earl Simms, the name everybody in Missouri politics knows. Thank you very much for joining us from here in St. Louis, right?
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
Phil, I would say I've watched you make predictions on this show and to me personally that have come true about that House caucus with almost perfect accuracy. The governor's State of the State speech sounded good. He said no gun control. He said he's going to be against Medicaid. They're going to do a rainy day fund. How does the House caucus react to that? Now that the clapping's over and everybody's gone, when you guys show up Tuesday, how do people react to that?
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of debate through the budget process. Every one of those things that were mentioned has a line item accompanied with it, and it's going to be a negotiation between the House, the Senate, and the governor to reach a budget that meets everybody's needs.
Well, Simms is interesting. I mean, you've watched this for a long time. They couldn't come up with a revenue estimate, right? I think that's a bad way to start that. If you're talking about everybody working together, if you can't agree on how much money you're going to have, it's hard to know what number to hit.
Yeah, it's a process like anything else, especially with the budget. There's a long road to go on that, but there's plenty of time throughout the legislature to come to an agreement and get that done.
Give me the House position on that. Why was the House wanting a lower number? What's the strategy behind that?
I think that our budget chairman is really cautious about the fiscal impacts on this state. We've got a lot of expenses that are going up, and we don't know what the future revenue estimates are going to look like next year. And so I think Cody wants to make sure that we don't break the bank with an overly optimistic view of how Missouri revenues could grow.
John Bowman, you've sat in rooms and discussed those exact issues many times. The governor steps up. It was a very conservative speech. I think he kind of used it to rein in some media coverage that might have gotten a little further out, maybe more on the media's plan than his plan. What do you think of the speech overall, though?
Overall, I was hoping that there would be some conversation around the 100,000 children who've been knocked off Medicaid. Mm-hmm. I think that would have been a great conversation. Medicaid expansion would bring billions of dollars back to the state. The problem we have here is we have people choosing between food and rent when health care should just be a simple option. So therefore, I was hoping that there would have been more conversation on Medicaid expansion. There's over 100,000 children that's been knocked off, 130,000 as a total. We should do better in that area.
Jesse Lawder, I assume you heard the speech. What did you think? I mean, it was a conservative governor trying to give a conservative speech, I heard.
Well, I think if it points to anything, it's that the governor's most trusted advisor is whoever's in front of him. He sat in a room with mayors across the state, talked about gun control. As soon as he got back to his party, batted down. Same issue with Medicaid. There's no accountability, there's no responsibility to what's been going on in the state Medicaid program, and that's going to be a real problem for him.
Representative, the Speaker put together a committee that was supposed to look into this. Is there any, by February maybe, that they're going to come back with a report and give at least a view of what happened as to why the roll shrink?
And it's pretty simple. The idea that 100,000 children were knocked off Medicaid is simply a lie. What happened was Jay Nixon failed to look at the rolls for nearly 10 years. And there were people that were on Medicaid that were not qualified to be on Medicaid, and they simply were not eligible anymore. And so the idea that they were removed from the system when they were deserving to receive benefits is simply not true. Anyone who was taken off Medicaid and believes that they're entitled just needs to call and they'll get put back on.
From your opinion, is that really the majority of the problem, or is that all the problem?
I think
there's some other issues associated with that.
I think it was bad bookkeeping that accounts for the entire problem.
That'll be interesting to see what they do.
And also, if you're going to expand Medicaid, that money has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And when over 30% of the rest of your budget is education, that's not a place where you would want to cut is education or other social services.
Joe, I tried to ask Jane Dueker this. She didn't have an answer. I mean, she said maybe a tax increase, which I think has about as much chance in that legislature as gun control. If you do expand Medicaid, which is on the ballot, and as of now, I mean, right now you see a division between urban and rural hospitals, but overall I think they're all going to be for this. And I don't see anybody lining up to be against it with real money to combat it. So if it's going to happen, that money comes from somewhere, right? I mean, you've sat in those rooms with real decisions. You don't just make up new money unless you raise taxes, which I don't see happening. What do you do? Jane didn't have an answer for where do you get this money from?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely there's a conversation that needs to be addressed. This brings truth to this conversation in regards to that. But the fact is, Medicaid expansion has probably about 62% of the voters in this state supporting it. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure it's going to qualify. There is, in rural areas, there's hospitals that are closed. This will give them a chance to open hospitals and give service to people who are in need, underserved communities, low-income individuals. So, you know, we have to put a face back on this. We have to put a human face back on this issue, opposed to just throwing numbers out.
Ms. Lawder, you're in the healthcare community. I mean, I do believe that as of now, I don't see any real reason it doesn't pass, right?
Absolutely. It's got a lot of public support. And I think one of the things that gets lost in this conversation is every academic study that's been done on this, including a recent one from Georgetown, says that expanding Medicaid actually brings in more revenue and drives down costs in the state. So the whole concept that this is going to cost us hundreds of millions of dollars is a farce.
You're a newlywed, congratulations, by the way, but you're not new to public policy. I think some of that's got to be true, that there will be some benefit to the state from the spending of this Medicaid money, but that's 2 or 3 years. Even at the most optimistic projections, you have a gap there till you receive those benefits existentially through other parts of the economy.
But you have a federal government right now that's kicking in 90% of the cost of Medicaid expansion. That's been the case. It actually, if we had expanded it earlier, they were covering closer to 100% when the Affordable Care Act was first passed. So the idea that we're going to suffer greatly from this, ignoring the benefit of covering hundreds of thousands of additional people in the healthcare system, and as John said, helping these rural hospitals stay afloat. They're closing down. If you look at the money that's been going into the Medicaid expansion, a lot of it is coming from these rural hospitals.
Well, I think it's true that if you spend a lot more money, $1 billion or whatever, in healthcare, there will be other benefits from people being employed. But even under the most rosy scenario, that takes a couple years for the state to see that benefit.
I'm sure
you have to make a decision next year.
I'm sure that there will be some benefits that accrue, but the average common sense Missourian is not going to buy the line that a massive expansion of a government program is going to save them money. It's simply not true.
Tell me who's going to pay the money to actually put that message out if you have, let's say consider $10 million on the other side of that. I mean, I don't see anybody, maybe you do, out there that's going to spend it's easier to beat something than to pass something.
Sure.
So you would need maybe half the money that they have. I don't see anybody willing to put up a tenth of the money.
I don't know who's going to finance it, but I do know that the best line of the governor's state of the state was that Medicaid expansion is a tax that Missourians simply can't afford. And I think that that's a simple message that can get out. And we have a large cadre of state representatives that are going to run around the state and let their constituents know the truth.
Tell me now, if the medical community spends $20 million, and I have and there's tons of Republican state reps to do that, though, you know, it just doesn't. I've seen these before. If one side runs a full campaign, the other side doesn't, I'll put my money on the side that runs the full campaign.
Well, I think, again, as the representative said, you're going to have folks out telling average Missourians what this is going to cost. And while I don't think any of us on this panel want to see people go without health care, but you know, there's a way to pay for it and a way to do that without this massive tax
increase. As a person that grew up at the table with politics, that's in depth in many of these state senate races right now that I know of, can you really tell that message if you don't have at least half the money that the other side has to tell their message? I mean, I don't know that you can win that race. I mean, what race can you win outspend 20 to 1?
Well, I think the message and folks are not interested in having their taxes increased.
And something tells me, I believe you'll have most of the urban newspapers saying this is the greatest idea since, you know, there's never been a better public policy. So you're going to have a lot of earned media there too. I think it's going to be tough. Give me a prediction. Is there a other side on this that brings $5 million to the table?
No, I think the supporters of Medicaid expansion are halfway there. I'm very confident that it'll qualify and the voters will pass it.
Is there organized opposition with money?
There may be a little bit, but it would have been a big waste of money. So I think a lot of folks are going to stay out.
Somebody put together $5 million to oppose this?
I think that we learned our lesson and we're going to fight this one.
think it'll be fought tooth and nail and not pass in the end.
You guys are political professionals. I'm just a simple West Butler County hillbilly. I don't think the money will be there, and I think it'll pass. And it'll be interesting to see what they have to do. Let's talk about something else, John Bowman. I was glad you're on the show. Clean Missouri changes.
Yes.
Right now, it's always been my prediction that if Nicole Galloway is picking the person that draws these lines, I don't think she decimates African-American districts, African-American majority districts in St. Louis and Kansas City, which is what you'd have to do to make the House radically more competitive with odd districts. I don't see her doing that. But I do think you could change these Senate districts a little bit and have a big impact. Where are you and the NAACP going to come down about being a safeguard of some of your African-American members who are members of the legislature?
You know, the irony of this conversation is that the national president of NAACP is in total support of the protections that are in Clean Missouri. Gerrymandering, as we know, is not just a partisan issue. It has been done
It's
on both
partisan
sides.
because they all do it. Yeah, it
both
is.
sides have done it. But I think this presents more protections for African-American districts than ever before.
You believe that, really?
I really do. Yeah, and you know, it's ironic that the Republican Party is acting like they care about African-American district being protected when they're the same people who bring you voter ID.
Well, Christofanelli, you're in a Senate district that's a very popular senator. Barklage will be reelected, I don't think there's any question. However, that district, he's more popular than Republicans are in that district. Could you move that? That's a district you can move around a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
and
if they drag our district into St. Louis County, that would dramatically change.
Put Maryland
nature of
Heights
it.
in that. That would be very hard for someone like yourself to win, I think.
I
Or any
think you're
Republican.
absolutely right.
But I think the Senate district that you're very familiar with, it's not going to be a House district. She'd have to do. She was appointed by Jay Nixon to do DSEG and never lived it down. I think Senate districts you could change a little bit and make a significant difference.
You could shift some of those around, but I think when you're going from the compactness argument to the competitive argument, it does a great disservice to those districts.
What do you think? I mean, you're a political professional. If you could draw those districts, I don't think you go decimate members of the NAACP, but I do think you can move Bill Eigel's district, Paul Whelan's. You could maybe put Randolph instead of Cooper into Caleb Brown's and really change the makeup of that Senate.
I think we're focused a lot on the end results here when what Clean Missouri did was establish a process. And until we go through that process, it's going to be very hard to make predictions about how we can wiggle
But I
districts
established
around.
a process of eating that made me this fat. So I think they've established a process that's going to lead somewhere. I think the process is going to matter, right?
I do think that the Senate districts are going to be much more impactful in the way they're drawn than the House
My
districts.
mom would say big bone, by the way. But with a minute left, who won the week?
I would say former State Representative Bruce Franks for being an Academy Award
Absolutely.
nominee.
That
for
is
his
a
documentary.
tremendous honor. Congratulations to him.
Absolutely.
And now I can say that I've been in an Oscar-nominated film.
Oscar nominated, yeah, right.
Who won the week?
This weekend is the 4th annual Women's March. I have to give it up to women. Women across Missouri and across the country have had a heck of a week.
Who won the week?
I'm going to say kids in failing schools because I think changing dynamics in the Senate are going to shake education reform loose.
Give me this prediction. If a bill passes the Senate, can you pass an education reform bill through the House?
I think that it comes out of the Senate, we can get it done.
You've never been wrong yet. Who won the week?
Governor Parson, strong state of the
That was a
state.
good speech. I'm going to say Cliff Smart down in Springfield. My gosh, comes with Bobby Petrino. Probably I didn't see that hire coming. I think it's another momentum thing. Nobody knows their area and their college better than Cliff Smart. Does a great job. We hope you'll do a great job. Be right here back with us next week on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, Spire, and Sterling Bank.